My lovely wife cheated on me with a younger man. To get back at her, I acted like we were going broke, all the while keeping my wealth safe. And she, scared of losing all that fancy living, didn't even know. Miles Landon, with his sharp business acumen and unassuming demeanor, had built a life many would envy. He owned a flourishing tech company, had a beautiful home in the suburbs, and was married to Eva, a woman whose charm and grace seemed to complete this picturesque existence. Their marriage, like their garden, was meticulously maintained, or so Miles had always believed. It was a crisp autumn morning when the fabric of his perfect world began to unravel. Miles was returning from his habitual jog when he noticed Mr. Henderson, his elderly neighbor, pottering around in the garden. As he slowed down to a walk, Mr. Henderson called out to him. "Miles, could I have a word?" There was a seriousness in the old man's tone that piqued Miles' interest. Wiping the sweat from his brow, he ambled over. "Of course, Mr. Henderson. Everything all right?" The neighbor glanced around, ensuring they were alone, and leaned in. "I thought you should know, I've seen someone visiting your house during the day, when you're at work. A younger man. He and Eva seem close." The words hit Miles like a physical blow. He felt a jarring disconnect, as if the tranquil scene before him, the manicured lawns, the gentle morning sun, was a facade. "Are you sure?" he managed, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. Mr. Henderson nodded gravely. "I wouldn't have said anything if I wasn't. I thought you should know." As Miles thanked him and walked back to his house, a whirlwind of emotions engulfed him. Denial, anger, betrayal. But above all, a cold, sinking feeling of having been a fool. He looked at his home, the one he had built with love and dreams, and it suddenly seemed foreign. Throughout the day, Miles replayed his marriage with Eva in his mind, searching for signs he had missed. There were late nights at work, sudden weekend plans with friends he never met, and a decrease in their conversations. How had he been so blind? That evening, as Eva returned home, Miles studied her with a newfound perspective. She was as radiant as ever, her smile warm, her laughter filling the room. But now, it all seemed like a performance. Dinner was a quiet affair. Miles responded to Eva's casual chatter with noncommittal grunts, lost in thought. She seemed not to notice, or perhaps, chose not to. Later, lying in bed next to her, Miles felt a chasm of disconnect between them. He watched her sleep, her face serene and untroubled, a stark contrast to the storm raging in his heart. It was then that he made his decision. He would not confront her, not yet. He needed to plan, to strategize. If Eva had chosen to play a game, then he would ensure it was one she wouldn't win. The next morning, Miles woke up with a sense of purpose. He would maintain the facade of their happy marriage while he plotted his next move. He kissed Eva goodbye, a little longer than usual, and left for work. His mind was clear. The game had begun, and he intended to play it well. Miles had always prided himself on his ability to think strategically, a skill that had brought him much success in the business world. Now, as he navigated through the turbulent waters of his personal life, he realized it was time to employ those same tactics at home. The plan was simple yet bold. He would pretend to be a man on the brink of financial ruin. The seed of deception was planted over breakfast. With a rehearsed look of concern, Miles shared with Eva, "There's been a significant loss in one of our major investments." "It's bad, Eva. Really bad." He watched her reaction closely. There was a flicker of worry, but it was swiftly overshadowed by a mask of support. "We'll get through this, Miles," she said, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. In the weeks that followed, Miles artfully spun his tale of financial disaster. He talked about loans, about potential bankruptcy, about the possibility of losing the house. Eva's demeanor changed gradually. The warmth she had feigned started to dissipate, replaced by a cold, distant politeness. She spent more time on her phone, often whispering in hushed tones when she thought Miles was out of earshot. Miles, meanwhile, was busy laying the groundwork for his revenge. He met with his lawyer and financial advisor, ensuring that his assets were securely transferred to a private account and setting up a substantial donation to a charity under an anonymous donor agreement. His public image of a struggling businessman was a stark contrast to the secure reality of his finances. The charade at home continued. Eva's patience was visibly thinning, her affectionate gestures, once frequent, were now few and far between. She started making subtle inquiries about their financial status, probing for details about bank accounts and investments. Miles provided vague, non-committal answers, fueling her frustration. It was during one of these tense conversations that Eva's phone buzzed with a message. She glanced at it, and for a brief moment, her facade cracked, revealing a glimpse of eagerness. Miles noted this, his suspicion about her affair growing stronger. He knew her lover was likely unaware of the financial play Miles was orchestrating, and this ignorance was something Miles could use to his advantage. As the pretense of financial ruin took its toll on their marriage, Miles noticed a shift in Eva's behavior towards her lover. She became more secretive, her meetings more frequent but also more desperate. It was clear she was trying to secure her future, uncertain as it was with Miles' supposed financial downfall. Each night, as Miles lay in bed next to Eva, he felt a mix of triumph and sorrow. Triumph that his plan was working, and sorrow for the love that had once been real but now lay buried under layers of deceit and betrayal. He knew the hardest part was yet to come, but he was ready. The stage was set, and soon, Eva would face the consequences of her actions. As autumn faded into a harsh winter, the charade of financial ruin that Miles had so meticulously crafted began to cast a chill over their once warm home. Eva's demeanor had shifted from one of distant concern to palpable anxiety. The luxurious life she had so comfortably settled into was now threatened, and with it, her mask of marital fidelity began to crumble. Miles, meanwhile, was playing his part to perfection. He portrayed the image of a man burdened by his failures, often seen poring over bills and fake bank statements, his face etched with feigned worry. To the outside world, he was a businessman facing hard times; inside, he was a strategist moving his pieces across a chessboard of his own design. The strain was evident in every interaction between Miles and Eva. Conversations were strained, filled with talk of money, or the lack thereof. Miles noticed the change in Eva's eyes when she looked at him. Where there was once affection, or at least the pretense of it, there was now a cold calculation, as if she was trying to gauge what she could salvage from their sinking ship. It was during one of these tense evenings that Miles noticed a change in the pattern. Eva received a call and, thinking Miles was preoccupied, answered in a hushed but urgent tone. From his vantage point, Miles could only catch snippets of the conversation, but it was enough. There was a note of pleading in her voice, a stark contrast to the confident, poised woman he had married. Later, through careful observation and a few discreet inquiries, Miles pieced together the reality of Eva's affair. Her lover, younger and far less established than Miles, was clearly uncomfortable with the turn of events. He had entered the relationship under the illusion of Eva's wealth and stability, not for a love embroiled in financial ruin. Miles watched as Eva's efforts to keep her lover interested became increasingly frantic. She would dress up for him, the same way she used to for Miles. She would leave the house smelling of expensive perfume, a sharp contrast to the increasingly frugal lifestyle they were leading at home. But her lover's visits became less frequent, his responses to her messages slower. The facade of their affair was beginning to crack under the pressure of reality. In the quiet of his study, Miles reflected on the irony of it all. He had set out to expose Eva's superficial love, only to find that her lover's affections were just as shallow. It was a bitter realization, one that left him with a sense of hollow victory. As Christmas approached, the atmosphere in the Landon household grew colder, both figuratively and literally. The lavish decorations and expensive gifts of past years were conspicuously absent, replaced by modest adornments and a sense of impending loss. Miles, in his solitude, knew that the final act of his plan was drawing near. He had watched Eva's facade crack and crumble, her once secure world now unstable and uncertain. The stage was set for the final revelation, for the truth to come out in all its harsh, unyielding clarity. And as the snow began to fall outside, blanketing the world in white, Miles prepared to bring an end to the winter of their discontent. The winter had been unforgiving, much like the cold reality that had settled over the Landon household. Eva's demeanor had grown increasingly despondent as the facade of their lavish lifestyle crumbled away. The tension between her and Miles was palpable, a silent storm brewing in the cold air of their once warm home. Miles, who had been the architect of this ruse, felt the weight of his deception. It was a burden he bore with a stoic resolve, knowing the end of his elaborate plan was near. He had watched Eva's struggle between her fading love for him and her dwindling affair, a battle that seemed to drain the life out of her. As the new year dawned, Eva finally broke the silence that had enveloped them. One evening, she sat across from Miles in their dimly lit living room, her eyes devoid of the sparkle that once captivated him. "I want a divorce, Miles," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, but laden with a finality that echoed through the room. Miles looked at her, his face an unreadable mask. "Are you sure that's what you want, Eva?" he asked, his voice calm.
"Yes," she replied, her voice firmer now. "I can't live like this anymore. I want out." Miles nodded slowly, accepting her decision with a quiet dignity. "Very well, Eva. I'll contact the lawyer tomorrow. We can discuss the financial arrangements then." Eva's eyes flickered with a glimmer of relief, perhaps at the thought of escaping what she believed to be their financial ruin. But that relief was short-lived. The following day, as they sat in the office of Miles' lawyer, the truth unfolded. Miles revealed that their financial ruin had been a carefully orchestrated deception. He explained how he had transferred his wealth into a private account and set up a substantial portion of it for charity. Eva sat in stunned silence, her face a canvas of shock and disbelief. The realization that she had been played at her own game, that her selfish choices had led to her downfall, was a bitter pill to swallow. Miles watched the play of emotions on her face, the shock, the realization, and finally, the regret. He felt a pang of sadness for what could have been but knew that this moment was inevitable. The divorce proceedings were straightforward. Eva was left with a settlement that was fair but nowhere near the lavish lifestyle she had grown accustomed to. Miles, true to his word, donated a significant portion of his wealth to charity, making headlines for his philanthropic efforts. As he stepped out of the lawyer's office, a free man, Miles felt a sense of closure. The game had ended, and with it, a chapter of his life that he was ready to leave behind. In the weeks that followed, Eva tried to reach out to him, perhaps in a bid for reconciliation or maybe just for closure. But Miles knew that some bridges, once burned, couldn't be rebuilt. He moved on, focusing on his work and his newfound role as a philanthropist. The story of Miles and Eva's divorce became a whispered tale in their social circles, a cautionary tale of love, betrayal, and the consequences of selfish choices. And as Miles embarked on this new chapter of his life, he did so with a heart that was wiser, albeit a little more guarded than before. In the aftermath of the divorce, the once lively Landon household stood silent, a testament to the dramatic turn of events that had unfolded within its walls. Miles, now alone, found the silence both sobering and liberating. It was in these quiet moments that he reflected on the journey he had embarked upon, a journey of pain, deception, and ultimately, self-discovery. Spring arrived, breathing new life into the world around him. Miles felt a parallel in his own life, a sense of renewal and purpose. The bitterness that had once consumed him was slowly fading, replaced by a newfound determination to use his experiences for something greater. Miles immersed himself in his philanthropic work. His substantial donations to various charities had made headlines, but for Miles, it was not about the recognition. It was about making a meaningful difference, about turning the pain of his past into a beacon of hope for others. As he became more involved in charity work, Miles discovered a side of himself that he had neglected: a compassionate, empathetic individual who found fulfillment in helping others. He traveled, met with different communities, and worked on projects that ranged from education for underprivileged children to supporting environmental causes. Meanwhile, Eva's journey post-divorce was a stark contrast. Stripped of the luxury and status she had once held so dear, she struggled to adapt to a more modest lifestyle. The realization that her choices had led to her downfall was a difficult truth to face. She reached out to Miles a few times, seeking forgiveness or perhaps understanding, but Miles had firmly closed that chapter of his life. Back in the community where they had once been a power couple, people whispered about Eva's downfall and Miles' transformation. Some pitied her, others admired him, but most were simply caught up in the drama of it all. Miles, however, paid little attention to the whispers. He had learned a valuable lesson that life was too short to be lived in the shadow of others' opinions. He had found a sense of peace and purpose that he had never known before. One day, as Miles walked through a park where he had once strolled with Eva, he realized how far he had come. The trees were blooming, the sun was shining, and for the first time in a long time, he felt genuinely happy. He was no longer the man who had plotted revenge against his cheating wife, he was a man who had risen from the ashes of his former life to create something beautiful and meaningful. As the story ends, we see Miles standing by a lake, watching the sunset. He reflects on the journey he has been through, the pain, the betrayal, and the growth. He understands now that sometimes, the hardest experiences in life are the ones that shape us the most. In the distance, children laugh and play, a gentle reminder of the purity and simplicity of life. Miles smiles, knowing that while the path ahead is uncertain, he is ready to face it with a heart full of hope and a spirit reborn. The phoenix has risen, and with it, the promise of a new beginning.